different paths along which to study uh, the history of European integration. And they are the two paths that were followed by the member states and the institutions over the years. We're talking of the first one, that is the conclusion of the treaties and the establishment of the institutions and further integration achievements, and we will see it through the adoption of new treaties and the revision of the previous treaties, and so we can call this the development of integration, of the integration process. And the other one is enlargement, so the dynamics of membership of the European.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is a very difficult to hear you. Would you mind having a handset or like hand-free? If you use that, this will be much better. I think. What do you say? If you have any, if you can arrange a hand-free or any other exceptional mic.
Let's try with headset. I have the earphones.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
No, I don't. I don't. I left them at home. I have no headset. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because a lot of students has already left due to this reason. They're not able to hear you properly. So I was thinking that if you can arrange a hand-free or some additional mic, because this laptop mic is not working.
This mic is not working. Can you hear me?
Ma'am, it's like you are sitting in a hall and every word that you say is sounding again and again. Yeah.
Maybe there is a mic here. Do you think that this one has its own mic? You have an idea? I can try to turn this off and see if the Hey, now can you hear me? Better, worse?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can.
Yes, it is much better, ma'am. Thank you very much for it.
Much better like this?
Yeah, exactly. It's fine now.
Okay, let's try this way. I have now the mic right in front of me. Let's see what goes on. Okay. So I was saying that the second important path along which to follow the development of the European Union, of European integration, is the dynamic of membership. So, and I'm saying this word deliberately because it was this dynamic has been enlargement up to a certain point, and then there has been a withdrawal. And maybe we don't know, might be that the UK's withdrawal was the first but not the last, maybe not at least possibility. So we have in the treaties a provision, which is Article 49, sorry, that provides procedure and criteria for accession of new member states. And there is Article 50 that provides procedure for withdrawal. So these are the provisions that regulate the dynamics of membership. Up to the last revision, which is the Lisbon Treaty, as we can see, 2007, there was no provision of withdrawal. So basically the choice to join the EU was considered irreversible, although many international law scholars said that the EU is based on international law treaties. So basically, international law rules should apply also to the EU treaties. So an extreme situation withdrawal was also possible according to the law of treaties, the national law of treaties, without a specific provision, but there was no need to apply that before, but after the introduction of this provision, there was the withdrawal of the UK. So these are the two paths to start European integration: dynamics of membership and the development through new treaties and new achievements in integration. Then here it shows you a few personalities that we can consider important for the development of EU integration, and we will read now immediately the declaration, the Schuman Declaration, so the declaration that was published, was made public by Robert Schuman, who at the time was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, the French Republic, and which was published, which was made public on May the 9th, 1950. The date that will become later the Europe's Day, so the first, the Europe Day, no? 9 May, to celebrate the day when everything started with the Schuman Declaration, that we will read immediately if we can. Then here it shows you the symbols that are also important for the identity of, for trying to establish a sense of belonging by Europeans towards the institutions. The European anthem, which is the Ninth Symphony, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony,
We can't hear you properly.
Called in English, I don't know. Then there is the European flag. You have seen it everywhere, no? In all, also domestic institutions, there is the European flag, then the euro. This is the symbol of the euro. And the motto of the European Union, which is united in diversity. We will get back to this because it is this motto, in fact, we can say that expresses the concept of European integration, which is a union, but a union that wants to respect the diversity and the contribution of each one of the member states to the union. And it's also translated into some principles, which is the principle of respect for the cultural identity and the national identities of the member states on the one hand, and on the other hand, the obligation of a fair cooperation between the member states. So come together on the one hand, but respect each other's identities on the other. And this is also reflected in the fact that the European Union does not have one official language or two, but it has 24. These are all the official languages of the member states. And as you can imagine, the problem of English arose after the Brexit, because all the other states that are English-speaking countries also have their own official language, like the Irish have the Gaelic, and the Maltese have Maltese, and they are the most important, the only states that have that are English-speaking as a first language, as an official language. But in the end, it was maintained. So they decided to maintain English as an official language, not only because of the fact that everybody speaks English in Europe, and that it is much easier also for the works of the institutions, but because these two states have English as a second official language. So it was possible to say that English is indeed the official language of a member state, because that is the thing. All the official languages of the member states are also official languages of the Union. And so we have 24. Now, what is the point here, the problem? The practical problem with having 24 official languages for a single institution. The problem is that all the documents, so all the legislation, all the case law of the Court of Justice, all the official documents have to be translated into all of them and published in the official journal, or there is one official journal for each one of the languages. Is that clear? So you will find the documentation, the legislation, and some of them, the non-binding documents sometimes are not translated, and you find them in the language, in the working language of the institution, that often is French or English, but the legislative documents and the judicial documents are all translated, and you can find them in all of the 24 official languages. Also on the website, where you have to choose the language you are interested in. And if you go to Luxembourg, where the headquarters of the Court of Justice is located, you will see that one of the towers, the two towers now that have been, they are finishing building a third one of these towers is just for translators, how big the service is. Okay, now it is interesting to see that this publication by the European Union starts the history of the Union with enlargement. With enlargement, and it starts with the big enlargement. Now we have to consider also the previous, so the small enlargements that came before, and that are also important. But here they want to show the last enlargements of the European integration and how Europe almost doubled its membership in the last years, how many now? 40 years? No, 30 years. How long? Since 1989? 40 years. 30 years. No, that's not exaggerated. 30 years. You were not even born in 1980. Yes? Well, sure about that. Yes. But before that, we have to go at the beginning. We said that there were 6 members, and those 6 members were of course, France, which is the one that had the initiative with the declaration that we are going to read, hopefully today, yes. And the 5 states that responded positively to the declaration, so that accepted the proposal that was launched by Schuman with his declaration. And there were 6. We already mentioned them: France and Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. And we are talking about the states that were, let's go back to the map. Where is the map? here. So we're talking about the states that were at the center of Europe during the wars, the First and Second World War, and particularly at the center, as we will see, because that's the point, the focus of the Schuman Declaration, the center of the dispute between European countries, and especially France and Germany, over the industrial, the heavy industry area of Europe, which is this area between France and Germany, but also Belgium, less the Netherlands, but Belgium is here, Luxembourg. If you go and visit this area, you still find what remains of that time. Now it's everything has changed because heavy industry, coal and steel and the mines are still there, but they are not in activity anymore. This is the mines, and it's very interesting. You understand how important it could be in the first half of last century, where that industry was at the core of the economic power and of the military power of the European countries. So everything started there. Then there was the addition of Italy, and here historians will explain that Italy was, of course, one of the defeated countries in the Second World War, and it was looking for a position in international politics, in international relations. And president of the government at the time was Alcide De Gasperi. He was very active in pursuing, how can we say, a replacement of Italy on the international scene on the side of the Western powers. And so this proposal that came from Schuman and the French, and let's not forget that Italy had moved to war against the French in the Second World War, was very important. It was very important. It was a choice, a deliberate choice by the Italian government to get back in that group, which is the group of democracies in Europe. And let's also not forget that at that time, so around 1950, Germany was not this one, but it was divided between Western democratic republic, the Bundesrepublik Deutschland, and the DDR, which was the socialist under the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union, which still existed at that time in the 50s, and together with a large group of the Western, Central and Eastern, Europe countries that now are members of the European Union themselves. So this was the situation of Europe at the time, and it was a situation of a continent where two wars had taken place in the let's say the lifespan, in the 20 years separated the two world wars. Because the first one was finished in 1819, no? With the peace treaties, and the second one was started in 1939 with aggression by Nazi Germany to Poland, and that what came after that. And Europe was destroyed by this catastrophe that had been bombing from one side and the other. It was divided, as we said, because part of the eastern part of Europe had been occupied and, of course, maintained under its influence by the Red Army, by the Soviets, while the western part had been liberated by unlike ours. And so this was the situation in Europe, a complete disaster. And this is where a new era of cooperation started to develop. Not only the European integration in the form of the communities, but also other international organizations. I want to mention here the military organization, which was NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is still a defensive, but it was conceived as a defensive organization. Now it has probably nothing against whom to defend us anymore, but it has developed other functions in the last 30 years, in the last 20 years. Other functions that are basically of maintaining security and peacekeeping missions, also in contact and connection with the United Nations. Among the criticism of international law scholars who see that what is clearly and exclusively treaty of self-defense, because that's what the North Atlantic Treaty is, quite difficult to change its functions into something that can operate outside the territory of the states it is supposed to defend. That is other things. Anyway, NATO, which is still important because it is also, as we will see, important for the defense of the European Union, which still is under the umbrella of the NATO. Almost all the members of the European Union are also NATO members. And then another important organization that was created at that time, also in 1949 as NATO, is the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is a completely different organization. It is an organization that now it has, I think, 47 members, if I remember correctly, all European countries, who are brought together by the idea of cooperating in the field of law, so especially for the protection of human rights in all the areas of life of individuals. So in the framework of the Council of Europe, a large number of conventions for the protection of human rights have been adopted. Specialized conventions, sectorial conventions. But the most important of them, and the one that we will also have to refer to studying the protection of fundamental rights in the European Union, is the European Convention on Human Rights. The European Convention on Human Rights was signed here in Rome in 1950, and that's why it is called the Rome Convention or the Convention of Rome. And you have to remember this, that the European Convention on Human Rights was signed in the framework of the Council of Europe, so it has nothing to do directly with the European Union. It is another organization. Then, of course, there is a connection. There is a connection, as we will see, because all the member states of the European Union are also members of the Council of Europe and are also contracting partners to the European Convention of Human Rights. But this is something that we have to study in due course. So, going back to the dynamics of membership, and before 1989, there have been a number of other sessions. And the first one, that's also interesting, like a cycle, you can say, of history. The first enlargement was precisely to the UK, Ireland, and Denmark in 1973. After that, the UK had previously repeatedly applied for membership, being rejected. Being rejected by, especially by France, at the time governed by General de Gaulle, who was convinced, and he was not alone in this conviction, that the British were not sincerely and truly willing to join the European process. They were islanders. They were living on an island. They were isolated. They were not, ready for this. For getting involved with the European continent. And probably the goal was right here. If we look at how the British interpreted their participation to the European process, they never were never fully involved. They always found a way to be different, to have a different approach, to be excluded from some achievements, having measures, some of the improvements not applied to them. They were never fully committed to the European integration process. That's true. That's why one of my colleagues, who is now retired, but is one of the, I think in Italy, one of the biggest scholars in EU law, and here has for a long time been worked at the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. And he tells me that every time there was some case that involved the British, it was a disaster. Because they were always distinguishing, because this is applicable, because this one is, will have to be treated differently, and so on. So he hated having to do with the British during the negotiation or a case. But that's, an individual experience, although a very well-informed individual. Anyway, also about this, about Brexit, I have to say that there is a division in the UK because the youngest generation, your peers, people of your generation, are totally against it. So they were starting to love the idea of being in close contact with other European states and having the possibility to move and to go around, the opportunities for work and residence and so on. So if you look at how it was voted, the distribution of votes, you see that those who were for leaving the EU were mostly oldest and less educated voters rather than the young and those with higher education. Now, unfortunately, it's over. But they were the first, with the Ireland and with Denmark. Also, Denmark has always been a little bit, on the border from inside and out. So Denmark is a part of the EU, but it is has some opting out options, which means that they are not bound by some of the policies of the European Union. Okay, after this first enlargement, there will be the Mediterranean enlargements, starting with Greece in 1980, 81. And it's after Greece and Spain and Portugal, they had a period of military government, dictatorships, so non-democratic regimes in Greece and in the Iberian Peninsula. After the end of the dictatorships, there was a period of adjustment to the democratic regimes, and then the application to membership of the communities at that time they were called, and they exceeded in the 80s. So we have Greece at the beginning of the 80s, and then 85, 86 was Spain and Portugal. And after that, there is another group of states that became members in the mid-90s, and it's here, Austria, Finland, and Sweden. Okay, so the two Nordics and Austria. Okay, we are in 1995. If we do not consider the unification of Germany, but that's an enlargement as well, if you want, which happened in 1991. It is an enlargement because the eastern Länder, so the regions, you know that Germany is a federal republic, and the member states, the regions of this federation called the Länder. So what happened with unification is that the Eastern Länder became members of the federation, which previously was the Western Republic, in order to unify the territory of the Bundesrepublik. So that's also an enlargement, because by joining the German Republic, the new Länder became also part of the territory of the communities. Is that clear? So there was an expansion of the territory of the Union to the new part of Germany that was that joined the western part. So, and here we are in 1989, where we can speak about the big enlargement. So the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of communism, and the necessity for the states of Central and Eastern Europe. Again here, so we are speaking about all these states. The need to have a sort of transition from communist regimes, political regimes, and also state economy that was characterized these states during the period of the Cold War, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And there was the need to start this transition to democratic institutions based on the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary and free elections, political parties, the plurality of political parties, and so on. And on the other hand, the economy. So transition from a state economy, where the economic role is of the state, of the government, to a free economy in free competition with the role of private undertakings and private property and so on. So you understand how complicated this was, because there was the need to completely change the physiognomy of the state, the mentality of the people, and build new institutions for these states. So here it says EU economic help begins with the FAIR program, which was the first program of financial help to these countries. But what is particularly important is the fact that the Commission, that the interested countries immediately applied for membership, but first they concluded agreements, cooperation agreements with institutions, and through these cooperation agreements, not only was aid granted to these states, but also, how can I say, advice and help in building in technical advice, in building the institutions, in legislative, advice, in establishing the new rules for competition, for the judiciary, and so on. And this was aimed at putting the states in condition to comply with the criteria for joining, the criteria that now are described in Article 49 of the treaty, but which were much more vague before they. So the states, the member states and institutions felt that it was necessary to go more into detail in explaining what is required of a prospective member state in order to join the club within them. So at the moment, and also now obviously, the first requirement is that the state has to be a European state. So non-European states cannot join the EU, and here you can start with your philosophy and your history and your anthropology to tell me what does it mean. So what is a European country? Where are the boundaries of Europe? How can we decide whether a state is or is not European? It's to your, if you want, to your fantasy besides that, or to what you have studied, of course. What is the problem? Example, one of the traditional candidates for membership is Turkey. And there was a discussion whether Turkey is or is not a European country under Article 49 of the treaty. It is, and it isn't, obviously, if you look at the geography, because there is a part of Turkey that is certainly European, there is a part it's not. And the same happens with many other states that at the moment maybe are not applying, but not, like the South Caucasus states. And even there was an application by, I think, at a certain point, Morocco. Morocco probably is not. Geographically, you can say that that's Northern Africa. But Morocco is connected to Spain, to the Iberian Peninsula somehow, through the Gibraltar, so we have to dispute even that. So it's not so absurd to discuss, to think about the boundaries of Europe. We consider Russia. Russia is a European country, obviously. Maybe the perspective of Russia applying for membership is far from real. But you never know. They could be entitled to become a member of the European Union. It would be great, I think. Anyway, the first criteria was that, geographical or cultural or whatever you want to consider, to be a European. And then the other criteria were more generic, so willing to be willing and able to respect the obligations established by the treaties and by the EU legislation. So in 1992, at the beginning of the process that later would bring all these states to become members of the European Union, the European Council, so the summit, the heads of state and government of the member states met in Copenhagen, and they established the criteria for accession, which are three groups of criteria: democracy and rule of law. Okay, so the states have to have democratic institutions, functioning democratic institutions, and they have to be based on the rule of law, which means that government and functioning of the institutions and the judiciary has to be based on the rule of law, on the legal system of law, on the legal order that has to be applied by an independent system of judiciary bodies that guarantees the respect of the rule of law. And this is the political, we can say, part of the criteria. Then there is the economic part. The state must have functioning market economy that must have completed the transition from the socialist system to the market system. A functioning market economy means that the economy must work according to the market laws on the basis of free competition, only regulated by the rules of competition that are established at EU level and also adopted by the Member States. And it has to be able to implement EU law. The last block of criteria is normative or legislative, if you want, or legal. So it has to be able to implement EU laws, which means that it has to accept all the so-called acquis communautaire, which means what has been acquired previously in terms of EU legislation, principles, legal principles and judicial decisions and so on, the acquis. It has to acquire everything inside its own system, and it has to be able to implement that, so to follow those rules fully. Although they were not part of the EU before session, so they did not take part in the establishment of that legal system, in the adoption of those rules. Nevertheless, they have to be able and willing to implement those rules, which means also that they have to be able to guarantee the rights and freedoms that are established by the treaties. So, for example, accept and do not discriminate against workers coming from other member states, that they grant freedom of access for service providers and all these things coming from other member states. So that they guarantee the freedom of movement for all persons and goods that come from other member states. These are the Copenhagen criteria. And on the basis of this criteria, the negotiations started with Central and Eastern European countries, and it is called the pre-accession stage of the process. Pre-accession means that the Commission, especially the Commission as the, you can call it, executive body of the Union, the Commission followed step by step the candidate countries in the process towards, complying with all those requirements. step by step, chapter by chapter, subject matter by subject matter. It was a very long process. And it was, I can say, a choice that was after that definitely taken in 2002 against Copenhagen, where and this was the political decision. Okay, the political decision was to accept this huge enlargement. Hmm? Which was not a very easy decision. And it was a challenge for the European Union because the risk, if you look at the map of Europe, and you consider that before that this was Europe, oops, no? Look at the map, this was Europe. So basically it was doubled, almost doubled, with the addition of all these new states. So it was a very difficult political decision for the member states of the time. And it was taken on the basis of a number of considerations, which derived certainly from the, I can say also the excitement and the importance of the moment, you know. The feeling that the Cold War was finished and that the democratic part of the world had won the Cold War because the Soviet Union was dissolved, because the socialist and communist regimes did not exist anymore. So there was excitement about that. Now you can imagine enthusiasm and the willingness also to help these new states to build their own democratic institutions. But at the same time, we must not also underestimate the fear. And the desire to have stability on the borders of the Union. So, and to have stability, they thought that the best way was to, how can I say, to have them inside rather than outside, where conflict and possible violence and problems could always emerge. Consider also that in these years here, so from 1992 to 2002, even before, but anyway, yes, because then there was Kosovo and Yugoslav war. So in these years, there was a war on the immediately on the EU's borders. There was a war, a very violent and terrible war that was fought with the dissolution of the former Yugoslavia. No? In those same periods, why the central eastern part of Europe was, everything was decided rather peacefully, more or less, with some areas of conflict that still remain, but basically it was, everything went, developed pacifically, peacefully. Not the same we can say about the Balkans, where the dissolution of the Yugoslav Republic was, the Republic of Yugoslavia was a violent war, no? The creation of the new independent states that were created in that area. And it was a war that culminated, first was solved with Dayton agreements in 1995, but then there was the problem of Kosovo, that was separated again, had its independence, but only after bombings by the NATO of Yugoslavia. So there was a war there. And the fact that there was a war there was one of the elements that some way forced but convinced the member states that they needed to have stable institutions, a situation of stability in Europe. And the only way to achieve that was to bring all these states in, which is what happened, and this happening also with the Balkan states, considering that Croatia will be the last one so far to join. Slovenia has joined in the first wave of accessions, and the current candidates are precisely the Western Balkan states, including Kosovo, Albania, and Yugoslavia, Serbia, and the former Yugoslavia. So, where are we? Okay, we're almost finished. I want to arrive to the enlargement. So, the decision was taken for all these many reasons. Okay, for the willingness to reunify the continent, the willingness to help the building of democracy on all territory of Europe, and also the desire of having stability on the borders that we will see will also remain after accession, only with the borders on the moving east with respect to former borders. And so they accepted, they decided for accession, and this was in 2004 the first 10 new members: Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia. Then 2007 joined Bulgaria and Romania. In 2013, Croatia. And this is it. So after that, we also have the Brexit as a dynamic of membership, but we have the candidate countries that are here, and as you see, they are all Balkan countries: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia. North Macedonia is was once known as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. You might remember that. And the problem with the candidacy of Macedonia was the name, because the name was disputed between Macedonia and Greece, especially, but also Bulgaria had something to do about the name, because Macedonia is considered the region of historic Greece, where Alexander the Great came from, and it is considered an important part of historic Greece. And now the region of Thessaloniki, Macedonia, this one is the northern part. Okay, if you look at the map. So in the end, after a lot of negotiations and discussion and disputes, they decided that this name of Macedonia, which is now the official name, is settled, and the state was able finally to apply for membership. Because what is important, and maybe I didn't mention it, is that for accession, so for the agreement of accession to be decided to be approved and to enter into force, there is the need for ratification and agreement of all the member states. So if only one is against, like in this case, Greece, accession is not possible, but neither candidacy is possible. So to become a candidate country, there is the need of unanimous agreement. Albania, Serbia, Serbia, which in order to become a candidate country had to accept, to say that will not put forward any claims against Kosovo, although there are still territorial disputes over areas of Kosovo, but Serbia agreed not to lay any claims on Kosovo in order to become a candidate country, because another thing that the European Union doesn't want and prohibits is territorial disputes or border disputes among its members. Okay, so when the states accede to the EU, they take the commitment not to lay territorial claims, so not to put in question the existing borders among them. By the way, this system has allowed Europe to maintain peace for 70 years, or more than 70 years, which is basically unheard of for European countries. So the fact of banning territorial disputes has helped, but you can ban territorial disputes because basically you ban borders, there are no internal borders. So basically there is not the need for border disputes. And this is precisely what Robert Schuman wanted to achieve with his declaration. And then there is Turkey, which is the oldest candidate country, because Turkey has been cooperating with the European Union for I don't know how long, for more than 50 years, because the first agreements were until in the 60s. So it's a very long-standing cooperation between the communities in Turkey, and it is a candidate since officially candidate since the 70s. I think I don't remember, but anyway, it's the oldest candidate. And the process of negotiating membership between the EU and Turkey has always been very difficult. So steps forward and steps back, and many problems, economic problems, political problems, respect for democracy and fundamental rights problems. So now negotiations are going slowly, if they are not completely blocked. Okay, so there are difficulties there. Okay, what time is it? I think that at this point we can stop, so you have your break. I apologize for today, and next week we will go back on Zoom, okay? Next week we are back on Zoom. Hopefully we will not miss anymore. Where are you guys?